Jason. I'm going to be turning it over to Jason now to get the webinar started.
Good morning, everyone. So thanks for joining here. The topic we're going to discuss today is StableNet and NMSaaS, a solution for every MSP. Okay, so just give me 1 second here. Okay. All right, hopefully everyone can see the screen, and we'll just dig in here. Okay, so StableNet and NMSaaS, a solution for every MSP. I'm Jason Farrer, one of the sales engineers here at Infosim. I've been here for about 2 years now, and I've been in the industry for quite some time. I've had various roles: network engineer at a couple of different telecoms around the country and large retail chains. So I've definitely been on the larger size network side of things. I'm turn it over to John now.
Thanks, Jason. Yep, my name's John Olson. I'm with NMSaaS now, but I have previously been a senior consultant at Infosim, and part of the original Infosim team. I have a background in electrical engineering, and as the slide shows, I was with Infosim for 4 years prior to spinning off NMSaaS. So I'm excited about talking to everyone on the call today about how Infosim and NMSaaS are working together to deliver solutions for MSPs. So I think first slide here is me. Just a little history about NMSaaS. Certainly everyone on the call, I would imagine, has heard of Infosim, but many of you may not have heard of NMSaaS. Again, I was part of the team that brought Infosim into the North American market, into the United States and Canada and North American market, and was running the engineering team there for a number of years. And one of the things that I found as we were really introducing StableNet and Infosim into this market back in the day was that there's lots of size customers, right? I mean, Infosim is obviously geared generally towards very large telcos, large enterprise organizations, and does a great job in that space. But there are certainly, especially in the service provider world, there are many service providers, literally thousands of them in this market at least, and I would imagine the same in the EMEA market and the APAC market, that are more small and mid-size. However, they still need a good solution. They still want to provide advanced services to their customers, the kinds of things that StableNet can do, but cannot necessarily jump in fully into the pool, as they say, with a large upfront purchase of the software, which is how Infosim is on-prem, as I call it, is generally sold. So there was a market there for the power of StableNet for mid-sized businesses and service providers, but it needed to be cost-effective. And so we decided along the way that the best way to try and to meet that market demand and deliver those features at a lower entry point was to deliver StableNet as a cloud-based software as a service offering, right? It was around the same time as many of the other kind of explosions in software as a service, and Amazon introducing AWS and all of this sort of build up around cloud. And it made a lot of sense that if we could also deliver StableNet as a cloud product, that would be good for certain customers, not for everybody. The large enterprises, large service providers, telcos, we're still going to probably want the on-prem solution, but that mid-tier customer may be very interested in doing a cloud offering, or potentially even starting as a cloud offering and then moving into StableNet on-prem, which is available, right? So in 2013, we spun off NMSaaS as a separate brand and business from Infosim, but we are partially owned by Infosim. We call ourselves a sister company. We work hand in hand very closely together to make sure that we can deliver StableNet to the end user in whichever form is best for the end user, for the customer, right? So if it's best on-prem, great. If it's best in the cloud, great. If it starts in one and migrates to the other, that's great too, as long as they're getting the benefit of the product. So we started delivering these services to customers in 2013. We've had great success doing so and building our customer base and again, working with Infosim to deliver these services. So today I think we're going to talk a little bit about the from a service provider perspective, whether you're big or small, some of the things that will help you that StableNet can do, and then really at that point you can decide, hey, from a delivery standpoint, what's best for me. You can move on to the next slide. Yep. So this one's back to you, I think, Jason.
Yes, thank you, John. It was great introduction there and briefing about the easy availability of StableNet in the cloud. So as far as the telco market goes, there's a lot of things that make managing your network a little difficult, such as the size of these networks are enormous, with the Charter buying Time Warner and Verizon now trying to buy Yahoo. That is creating quite the nightmare for the network team and monitoring all that, because I'm sure they all had their own tool sets to manage their networks and monitor everything, and now they've joined together, and those networks weren't designed from the onset to be a single network, so they end up having to kind of piece things together. It's usually a pretty slow process to get things smooth and under one roof. And of course, the telco market, they're constantly trying to change their offerings. Almost everybody offers some sort of a triple play service where they provide cable TV, internet, and phone service. They're constantly in a race for who can offer the most bandwidth and the most predictable bandwidth. And now there's even fiber to the home. So these create a lot of challenges for disparate systems to have to monitor and piece together. If you want to check the quality of your various feeds, there's a lot of times that you have to generate traffic to stress these links out, or to you can define an entire service. That's one of the beautiful things that we have about StableNet, is that you can define alarms and link them together and say how one is dependent on the other. So in the case of fiber to the home, you can check the on-prem equipment because you have access to the backside of that equipment and all of the switches and routers in between that are providing these various services, and you can make linked weather maps and linked alarm structure, so as things start to happen out there in the wild, you're aware of it in much earlier fashion, and you can adequately tell how things are being affected. And these telcos are constantly trying to do anything to differentiate themselves from their peers. They think that this celebrity or that celebrity helps them, or they have, as I've already mentioned, different speed packages, and we have rollover, and etc. And as I mentioned earlier, with these very large networks, there's a lot of redundancy in place and a lot of overlapping tool sets. So the StableNet solution, we have a very scalable solution due to the way that we monitor things. It's a very efficient solution, so we can scale to great numbers. We have customers that are approaching 1 million measurements, or over 50,000 network elements under management. So now I'm going to turn this back over to John here for a second about the mid-size service providers. Wait, something just happened here.
Did we
Okay.
lose my slides?
I'm not sure. Hopefully they're coming.
That's okay.
Hopefully they're
You
coming.
could take on this one for large MSPs.
Okay, so for the large MSPs here, we have the concept of multi-tenancy. You know, a lot of people have that, so everyone has their own IP spaces. And the way that our tool works, we have the server and then we have the agent software. The agent software is usually installed on a piece of hardware at or very near the customer prem. And with our multi-tenancy, because we have the varying agents, the IP of the device and the agent can be tied to one, so that allows you to have completely overlapping IP spaces, and the software will not be confused at all. And we have the concept of role-based access control, and this allows users to only see the devices and measurements and maps and reports and everything that they are allowed to see. And because of that, we can really simplify the process, so you can have one report, and if I look at it as an administrator, then I will see all of the nodes and measurements. But if someone else were to look at it, they would only see the devices that they're allowed to view. And in the networking and data center technologies, in the data center, you know, everyone's moving to NFV and SDN, and StableNet is doing all we can to stay on the forefront of that. As a matter of fact, there's a few of our employees that are participating in a standardization of SDN and NFV in the European market, you know, trying to facilitate everyone to get on the same page. Due to the power of our tool, as I've kind of already alluded to, we can definitely bring in and allow you to have just a one pane of glass view of your network. Some of the problems that present themselves is if you're using multiple tools to manage your network. You have one tool for your configurations and another tool monitoring your performance. Then it makes it difficult to make a consolidated report, because you have to create a report that somehow spans across multiple tools. And once StableNet is able to take on all of these different processes and monitoring and reporting, then now that allows for a lot smoother reporting, and you can have one single report that shows any number of different things from what used to be disparate tool sets. And I'll touch a little bit about on our scalability. This is due to the fact that our monitoring is done in a very precise way. Each installation, whether in the cloud or on-prem with a physical server, is completely tailored to your solution. So we're not taking measurements that you know, a lot of tool sets provide. Just normally you just install it, discover a device, and what gets measured is what gets measured. It's hard to make a company change paths and stop collecting information or to add new devices. But we have already a very wide support for varying vendors and technology. So if ever you come across something that we can't provide, just let us know, and we will quickly get the developers on the issue and bring that device into the fold.
Yeah, I think, Jason, that's an interesting point that you just brought up there at the end about the total, the ability of StableNet to be very vendor agnostic, right? I mean, you probably see it on the large scale a little bit more than I see it, where the vendors for the mid-level MSPs tend to be more of the standard ones that everyone knows about, you know, the Ciscos and the HPs and so of the world. But when you get into the large providers, man, you could have lots of different things, right? So you have to have a solution that's completely vendor agnostic. So, you know, it's one thing that I remember from my days, you know, with Infosim is how great that was, and the ability to add new devices very quickly. So I think you might want to head back one slide for me, Jason. I think you skipped it. Yeah, that's me. So now I'm going to talk about, as Jason talked about, what's really great about StableNet for those larger telcos and service providers. I'm going to talk about how StableNet fits also equally as well in the mid-size service provider type market. One of the things that was on, I think 2 slides ago, you mentioned, Jason, was grasping for differentiation. And you were alluding to the different, you know, telcos and their service plans and things like that. But it's kind of interesting. I would use that exact same phrase, grasping for differentiation, on the mid-sized service providers where we're talking to them. And for us, it's not so much about service plans, but it's about what kind of business they want to have. The mid-level service provider market, at least here in North America, is very much geared towards sort of break-fix, PC, VoIP phone, wireless controller, you know, access point kind of monitoring, a little servers thrown in there, and then a little bit of network thrown in there at the very, very end. And that's great, you know, for the really small businesses that have, you know, 30 seats or 40 seats or something like that. But that quickly becomes a very commodity-based platform, meaning that it's it's very inexpensive. Everybody's competing for the crumbs. You know, you have lots of providers out there that all want to do the same thing. There's not a real differentiation in what you can do in terms of, you know, PC, desktop monitoring. But so where you can get higher value services is if you can break out of that and into larger scale customers. So not as large as the ones that you deal with, but larger enterprise, mid-level enterprise, let's say, you know, maybe 300 devices, 500 devices, something like that. Networking devices, so switchers, routers, firewalls, that kind of thing. And therefore, as an MSP, if you can get some of those customers, your value goes up. What you can charge to them goes up. What you can charge per device goes up. And you really become less of a break-fix commodity player and more of a high-end network infrastructure player. And that's really where most of the MSPs that I talk to want to go. They want more of that. But there's 2 problems with that. One, they may not have the financial resources to invest in a big CapEx purchase like of StableNet on-prem in order to support those customers, especially if they only have 1 or 2 or just getting started in that market. They need to be able to kind of grow or get the solution without having to spend a lot of money up front. And we offer, of course, NMSaaS is great for that because we offer that full power of StableNet, but more in a OpEx model. So software as a service model, pay for what you need. If you get 1 customer, you have 1 customer's worth of cost. If you get a second customer, then you have 2 customers worth of cost, and you build up over time and only pay for what you use. But the second thing it also gives, the second issue they have to overcome is that they need to have a product that can support those larger networks, right? So the same tools that they would use to monitor and support desktops and servers is not the same tool that would work well to support, you know, a more large-scale network. They need to have a platform that can do those things for them, and that's again where StableNet shines, right? StableNet is obviously, its history comes from that more networking centric background, and of course has expanded into data center and everything else you described, but it really is phenomenal when it and compared to any other service provider platform out there when we're talking about, you know, high-level network sort of knowledge and understanding. So by using NMSaaS and using StableNet, they've got the ability to go after those larger enterprise customers, but not have to bite off a big piece of the apple ahead of time in terms of cost. It can be done as a software as a service model, and that's where, for us at least, it's really found a great home in that mid-level MSP for those reasons. And of course, you also need some of the other capabilities like multi-tenancy and role-based access. That doesn't change, right? Even whether you're large or small, especially on a service provider view, you have to have all of that capability as well. So it really does dovetail very well with what the larger players are doing and what the mid-sized players are doing. You can probably move on to the next slide for me now, Jason. This deployment slide just gives a good example as to how we do things a little bit differently from traditional Infosim on-premise, right? For those of you on the call that already know Infosim, or maybe are a customer working with them, the platform itself is made up of a few different components: the agents, the server, the database, and so forth. In a traditional on-prem deployment, all of those components are going to be on-prem, right, at the service provider and at the service provider's customers. But they would maintain, whether it's an appliance or in software, you would be responsible for installing and maintaining the database and the server and really running all of those components on your own hardware, or again on an appliance maybe that Infosim provides. But in the cloud deployment, we run that for our customers. So on the end customer site, there's still an agent or multiple agents, depending on what they need, that's talking to the end devices. So on the bottom of this screen here, the on customer premise, there's still that piece of software typically running on a VM, usually one agent, at least in our world, because our MSP customers, their customers tend to only have, again, maybe 100, 200, 500 devices. Some are a little bit larger, but even at 1,000 devices, you can handle that with one agent. It's the one doing the communication to the end devices, doing the pinging, the polling, collecting net flow, running scripts, collecting log messages, and all of that information directly to the devices. So that doesn't change. But what changes is then those agents communicate up to our global cloud infrastructure, where we maintain everything else: the middleware application server, the back-end database, all maintenance upgrades or changes or bug fixes or any of that kind of stuff is handled by us. And so we sort of run all that for you. Which obviously alleviates even the training requirements for our customers, because they don't need to know how all that stuff works. They just really need to focus on their customers and get the agent up and running. Then as a user, whether it's in the MSP NOC or wherever, they still access the products in the same fashion you would with traditional StableNet. You have the rich client, you have a web client, you have a mobile app. You can use any or all of those to get into the information, to check out your alarms, to create your reports, to get your dashboards, all of that stuff. Most of our MSPs don't make that portal, I guess, available to their customers. Some do in very limited ways, maybe through a weather map, as Jason mentioned earlier, but typically not a full access. They use it themselves. They might provide weekly, monthly reports or something to their customers. If there's an alarm, maybe the customer also gets the alarm just so that they can see what's going on. But it's typically a little bit more controlled. I think in the larger service providers that might be a little bit different. We also have fewer requirements for connectivity to third-party systems, because there just aren't as many third-party systems in the sort of mid-size world. There may be a trouble ticket system, but there's not usually much more than that. But certainly everything that Jason talked about in terms of API capability and the REST interface and all of those things are equally as available in NMSaaS as they are in StableNet on-prem. So you get all of the power and all of the benefits of StableNet, but just delivered in a way that makes it a little bit easier for those customers to get into the product, and so I think it works really well. One of the cool features I know in larger scale customers is the ability to be a manager of manager, and I think that's what Jason's going to be talking about next.
All right, thank you, John. It was very nice. So now, as far as the manager of managers goes, as has already been mentioned here, we do have a full REST interface, and we can integrate with just about any other products out there through our APIs or the other tools APIs. As I mentioned earlier, our monitoring is very customized to your environment, so you're not getting inundated with alarms that are just noise and you're not interested in. We have the concept of external measurements, and those are scripts. We come integrated with quite a few scripts off the bat, such as we have a multimedia script to go and send voice or video or data information in between agents, so you can test the varying connectivity and link quality between your disparate sites. So you can, if you run these tests, you can have a nice baseline of what normal looks like in between your Chicago branches and your Miami branches, etc. One of the larger tools that we, one of the larger, more powerful modules that we have is something that we call distributed syslog. And what this allows is for the processing of very large amounts of syslog data. One of the clients that I work with quite a bit was receiving 10 gigs per day of syslog data from a single firewall in their environment. This was causing troubles whenever there was an incident and they were having to go back and search through multiple gigs worth of syslog data with just like grepping through the information or collecting all the logs between a certain time interval. So we spoke to them and solved their problem with our distributed syslog module, and that allows for pre-processing of the syslogs as they come in real time. We've set rules to split them up into different categories. So when an incident does happen, you only have to search through a much smaller data store to find that information and piece it together. We provide you with a front-end GUI to all of these data stores, so you can search for time in different strings. We allow all sorts of wildcard characters and everything you would expect through the CLI, but we present that to you in a GUI fashion so you can quickly piece together what happened. You can search through 2 different stores, 1 store, 20 stores, as many different stores as you like, and because they've been split up into much smaller chunks, the return data is much more responsive. This particular client was actually trying to replace Splunk, which is quite an uphill battle, but we've got them there and been able to piece together all the information that we needed. Because of our REST interface and all the APIs that we support, that greatly lends to our tool consolidation. What usually happens is most clients will begin with just a few of our modules, and over time, through discussing with us, because we like to be very integrated and part of your decision making and assisting you in properly monitoring and managing your network. So over time, we will end up sucking in the capabilities and duties of all of their different tool sets. So we can digest the configs if you have another product that does that, or we can collect syslogs from another server if you already have one of those and you don't want us to handle that, or whatever. It's completely scalable Swiss Army knife type solution. Now I'll give a quick summary. As John has eloquently mentioned, the StableNet is available through NMSaaS in a cloud format, or if you like to host your own, if you're a smaller company, you can host your own with an on-site server. Even if a large company, we can do you can do an on-site server as well. It's a very scalable solution. The custom monitoring will keep down all the noise and everything and the external measurements. You can write your own scripts. We have scripts. You come up with a situation that requires a script and we can write that for you. Again, back to the scalability. We have customers that have like 1 million measurements on a server, and clients that have over 50,000 network devices, and the servers are handling this with great ease. And that's a tall order to manage so many devices. And the tool consolidation, as I've already mentioned, that's our great strength. If you ask me, is our ability to take on all the functionality and saving you lots of money by not having redundant tools and giving you a single pane of glass. Thank you everyone for joining. Once again, please feel free to pop any questions into the questions in the chat session. Since everyone's muted, we will see those and address those as we come to them.
I think while we're waiting for those questions, Jason, one thing to mention, of course, is that if you are interested in evaluating either Infosim on-prem or NMSaaS, we do offer proof of concept and evaluation versions of the software that you can get started and check it out. They're fully supported by both teams to help you get installed, get up and running, onboard your devices, see how we can work in your environment, usually in parallel with any other systems that you have. So, we definitely encourage anyone who's interested in that to hit either of our websites, the Infosim website or the NMSaaS website, and gather more information. We both have an area that you can fill out a form and get contacted by a team to work with you. And of course, we have lots of other information on the sites as well, many other resources, videos, white papers, product sheets, solution briefs. So, we certainly encourage you to check out that information. Also note that this webinar has been recorded, and the recording of that session will be available to anyone who registered for the webinar. And we also included a handout in the webinar as well. You can get this slide deck as a PDF, so I think you can get that right from the handout section of the GoToWebinar panel, but you'll probably also get an email post-webinar with that information. So, Jason, it doesn't look like we have any questions at this point. Hopefully that means we answered everybody's questions, but I don't see any on there for now.
Let's hope. All right, thank you everyone. Have a wonderful day.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.